Hey y'all, welcome to week 10 of your first year of drum lessons, Drum Pad Edition. My name is Penny Larson and I am super happy to have you with me today. Today we're going to continue our studies on the snare drum and hand technique kind of things, and we're going to talk about a new rudiment. We're also going to sort of expand a class of rudiments, and you can say we're going to talk about a new rudiment. I'll get to that in just a sec. And then we're going to learn a new kind of note. So we've got a lot of stuff to do today. As always, handouts are going to be down below in the doobly-doo as PDFs, and I encourage you to print them out or download them on your device and follow along, or use them when you're not watching the video as a practice aid. So let's jump right in. The first thing we're going to do today is the 5-stroke roll. The 5-stroke roll is a short version of a double-stroke roll. All the rolls, it's a half a beat long, so 1/8 note in 4/4, typically. All of the rolls between a half a beat and 2 beats have names. So there's the 5-stroke roll, which is a half a beat, the 9-stroke roll, which is 1 beat, and so on. And you can look at hopefully you printed out your Percussive Arts Society Rudiment sheet. I'll link that again down below as well. The 5-stroke roll is just 2 doubles and then a single stroke, and then 2 doubles and then a single stroke. And like I say, it's half a beat long generally in 4/4 time. Hopefully you've been working on your doubles. As we're starting to get to the point where doubles are going to become really important. Okay. The 5-stroke roll is a great exercise if you're having trouble with doubles, because the doubles take up a very short stretch of time. So let's start. All right, so this is our sheet that'll be down below. And I separated them into 2 sections, A and B, but then each line has a repeat at the end. And I did it this way so you can work on the top line, or the second line, or the third line, or you can work on letter A together. Spoiler alert, the second line and the third line sound the same, they just look different. Okay? So the first thing we should probably talk about is, hey, wow, here are notes with 3 beams. We haven't seen those before. But following in our series, we had quarter notes, which have just a right here, right? Just a stem with no flag or beam. Then we have 1/8 notes. We cut the quarter note in half and we get 1/8 notes. 1 beam or flag if there's only one. We cut 1/8 notes in half again. Then we get 2 beams for 16th notes. We cut 16th notes in half, and then we get 3 beams, 32nd notes. 32nd notes are 8 notes per beat, which sounds awfully fast, but remember, there are 2 things that determine how fast you're playing. One is how many notes per beat you're playing, but the other is how fast the tempo is, right? So if our tempo is very slow and we're playing 32nd notes, they're not going to seem very fast at all. Okay? So let's start with the very top line. This is going to be our sticking pattern. Measure 2 is sort of a slowed down and expanded 5-stroke roll. What I did in the first measures of all of these lines is give you the primary notes. So learning to play double strokes is, I mean, again, it's one of those things that I'm I'm still working on. I'm never happy with my double strokes, right? So it's an ongoing process. There's a few ways that you can get there at first. One is to simply let your sticks I am holding the stick pretty much as loose as I can without dropping it. I am cradling it through my whole hand, right? I'm not even pinching at the fulcrum like we've talked about. I'm trying to hold it as loose as I can just to get a bounce. This sounds very lopsided, right? The first note is a lot louder than the second. And so this wouldn't be a good long-term approach to playing doubles, but it can be a good boost to get yourself there if you're really struggling and having trouble. When I first started playing, I joined a drum corps that then went out of business, because that's what was happening in the late 70s, early 80s. But so I had a drum instructor for a few months, and then I didn't for a year or two. But I had learned the double stroke roll and the paradiddles and a few of the rudiments in that brief time that I had a drum instructor. But I hadn't learned anything about technique, really. So I was on my own, and I didn't know that I was allowed to let the sticks bounce or that I could use my fingers. So another way that you can get there with doubles is, even if you're holding on with your fingers, I don't want to say tightly, right? We don't want to squeeze. But even if you're not using your fingers, if you relax your wrist, right? That was no fingers, no bounce, that was just my wrists. And again, that's not my preferred way to play. It's very labor intensive, right? There are a lot easier ways. I'll tell you the quick way. We're not going to do an exercise for it right this second, but I'll tell you the long-term goal is what we're really looking for is kind of a compound motion wherein you open your hand and then you close your hand, and that's how you get the double. But usually, one of the other ways of playing doubles first is the way that you get there, and then learning the open-close is kind of a way that you refine the pattern. Okay, so if the open-close thing seems too much at first, totally cool. So let's talk about five-stroke rolls. And you can see in letter A, I've got 2 eighth notes and then a quarter note, twice in the first measure, and then 4 16th notes and a quarter note in the second measure. So what's going on here is I am setting up the pattern in the second measure. You can see the second measure is the five-stroke roll, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm setting that up in the first measure by playing 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 E and a 2, 3 E and a 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 E and a 2, 3 E and a 4. The first measure, those primary notes, if you can do that loosey-goosey bouncy thing or loose wrist thing, then it's just a matter of playing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay? The second and third line are the same basic thing, just now we're going to use 16th notes for our primary strokes and 32nd notes for the five-stroke roll. So I'm going to slow my tempo down so that these notes won't get crazy fast right off the bat. Okay? So I've got 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and 2 4 5 2 4 5 2 4 5 2 4 5 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. The next line, the third line, starts out the same, right? I've still got 2/16 and an eighth, 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and then the second measure on the last line, I've got eighth notes with these weird slashes, right? Right here. And those are tremolo markings. And what they mean, can mean a few different things given the context. But for drummers in this context, what they mean is you are going to play, let's count the beams, right? Let's pretend that those slashes were beams. So I've got an eighth note single beam up at the top, but then those two slashes add to make it 32nd notes. So what these two slashes on an eighth note tell me is that I'm going to play an eighth note worth of 32nd notes. What? That's confusing as heck. So what did I say? There's 8 32nd notes per beat. Okay. So what kind of note takes up a whole beat? A quarter note. So there's 8 32nd notes in a quarter note. Here's an eighth note. An eighth note is half of a quarter note. Okay. So I'm going to play 32nd notes for an eighth note. Well, what's half of 8? 4. Piece of cake. So I'm going to play 4 32nd notes, just like I was up here. Okay? That's why I wrote both these versions, is so you can see every single note played, and then this is more how it would be written in normal parlance, right? This is how you're going to see it much more often than this. Okay? So that is a 5-stroke roll if it starts on the beat. Okay? So if I were to count the line 3, just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... See how the 5-stroke roll is taking up an eighth note. 1 and 2 and 3 and I could count that note in the middle, 1E and, right? 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and, but I don't have to. So we're to the point now where however it starts to make the most sense to you is the best way to count, right? There isn't one, I know I say this all the time, so hope I'm preaching to the choir at this point. But there isn't one way to count this stuff, right? There's the way that helps you to play it. I don't care how you count, I care how it sounds when you play. Okay? So that's letter A. And like I say, you can play the 3 lines together, but I grouped them together like this, not really because I expect you to play them together, but because they kind of go together. So then what is letter B all about? Well, letter B is 5-stroke rolls that start on the and, right? So if these rolls are half beat long, the way we just did, 1 and 2 and, well, we can also do 1 and 2 and 3. Ah, fancy, right? So let's see how we get there. So letter B starts out with, similar to letter A, just now instead of 2/8 and then a quarter, I start with the quarter. So I've got 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2E and a 3, 4E and a 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2E and a 3, 4E and a 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2E and a 3, 4E and a 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Right? So when they're off the beat, it's a little more confusing to count them 1, 2, 3, like that, right? Because you're starting kind of on the upbeat. You're landing on 3 more, and that'll be clear in the next line too. So the second line of letter B now is, remember our 16th note patterns. So I've got an 8th and 2 16ths, so that's 1 and 2 and 3, right? So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1. And then the third line in letter B, same thing as the third line in letter A, is the same as the second line, but now it's written more the way you'll see it. And so same thing, we've got those slash notation for the tremolo here, right? And so what's going to happen is now it's still a roll that lasts an eighth note, but instead of lasting the first half of the beat, 1 and, it lasts the second half of the beat, and 2. It sounds the same as the line before it, it's just written a little differently, right? So here's the bottom line. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 1. One last thing I should mention, just about the notation. If you see the little dashes on the eighth note tremolo version, that lets you know, oh, there's some sticking going on in there. And after some practice, you'll just know. You'll look at an eighth note roll and you'll say, oh, that's a 5-stroke roll, right? You'll just know, okay? And that's why we're practicing these patterns, so you can look at them and recognize what's going on. And you don't have to be thinking about, wait, how many 30-second notes is it all the time, right? You wanna be processing written music as quickly as you can. Okay, so like I said, if you haven't been working on your double stroke rolls, this might be a little tricky. This is a good time to start working on your double stroke rolls. I usually tell students there's nothing more important. There's no bigger single step that you're going to take in your drum studies that you'll take when you go from not knowing how to play double strokes to knowing how to play double strokes. Even if they're okay, right? You'll know, right? There's like that big, the analogy I always love to use, it's like riding a bike, right? It's been a very long time since I've ridden a bike. I probably don't ride a bike very well anymore, but I still know the trick of riding a bike. It's the same with doubles. There's a trick. You need to relax something somewhere, and you need to figure out where. I told you a few different things you can think about. You can relax your wrist, you can relax your fingers, you can do that open-close thing, right? Even for double strokes, there isn't one right way to do them. But you just have to plow through and figure out that feel, right? The reason I use the bike example is because when you can't ride a bike, watching someone ride a bike and not tip over seems like magic, right? Like that level of balance control just seems remarkable. And then once you can do it, it seems amazing that you ever didn't know how to do it, right? And doubles are the same thing. Until you can do them, they seem just, oh my God, mind-blowing. And then once you can do them, you'll think, oh, why did I ever struggle with these? Okay? So keep plugging at them. Like I say, if you've had trouble with the double strokes, the 5-stroke roll being a little short kind of snippet of doubles can be a helpful way to start working on your sticks bouncing. Okay. So now we're going to talk about triplets, which, woo, what the heck is a triplet? So we're going to do a short version and a long version, and I'm going to tell you the long version just because when I'm studying something, I don't like the short version. So sometimes I will give you more information than probably you need at the level you are. But that's the type of student I am, and so I'm going to treat you that way too. And even the long version, I'll keep a little on the short side. So the short version, ready? Here you go. Triplets are 3 notes per beat. Boom. Okay, that's the short version. The slightly longer version is, up until now, we've gotten our note values by cutting other notes in half, right? We started with the whole note, we cut it in half, we got the 2 half notes, we got those in half, we got the 4 quarter notes. Quarter notes are 1 note per beat, right? Then we cut those in half and we got 1/8 notes, which are 2 notes per beat. Okay, cool. Then we cut those in half and we ended up with 16th notes, which are 4 notes per beat. Hey, wait a minute, we skipped 3 notes per beat, right? So we need some way to do this. Of course, 3 notes per beat exists, right? 5 notes per beat exists, 7 notes per beat. It's just a matter of explaining them notationally, right? So how do we do that? There's a couple different ways that you can think about it. And I'm going to give you the way that the sort of the long version that I learned first. There's kind of an even longer version, but it's more esoteric, and I think it would just be horribly confusing. So if you notice, so these are the triplets, the groups of 3, and they have a 3 on top, and they have 1 beam at the top. Huh. 1 beam. Where have we seen that before? 1/8 notes, right? And so these we're going to call 1/8 note triplets. And that 3 on top tells us that they're triplets. 1/8 note triplets, that 3 tells us, hey, I know that these are 1/8 notes, but we're going to put a 3 on top, and that lets you know that we're going to do 3 of these in the space where 2 normally go. Sometimes you can see this 3 with a :2, so 3 to 2 is representing like a ratio. Very literally 3 in the space of 2. Triplets are common enough that we usually don't do that. When I was in music college, I was very pretentious, and so I started doing that because of course I did. But it's not necessary at all, right? Because triplets are so common. You see a group of 3 notes with a slur over the top and a 3, you're like, oh, that's triplets. Honestly, even without the 3 on top, most people would probably be able to decipher triplets, but the 3 helps to avoid any confusion. So that's what triplets are, 1/8 note triplets. 3 notes per beat, so 3 notes in the space of 1 quarter note. These get a little tricky for 2 reasons. One, there is now no perfect halfway point, right? When I was going from 1/8 notes to 16th notes, if I play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and all I need to do is put my left hand in the middle, and I have 16th notes. With triplets, if I'm playing 1, 2, 3, 4, to divide those in 3, I need to start alternating my hands. And this is one of those funny things. How many hands do you have? You have 2, probably. Is 2 an even or an odd number? It's an even number, okay? there's 3 notes in a triplet. Is 3 an even or an odd number? It's an odd number, okay? So when I play an odd number of notes with an even number of hands, it changes hands every time I start a new triplet. Kind of like the paradiddle, but totally different, right? So we're just alternating, right? So if I just started playing and you don't know what subdivision I'm playing, okay? So now if I start counting groups of 3, the 1 is gonna, one time it's gonna be on my right hand and the next time it's gonna be on my left hand, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1. Okay? So, numbers 1, 2, and 3 on this handout are going back and forth between quarter notes and triplets. This is probably going to be the one where you're going to have to spend some time. And then 8th notes and triplets, and this one is going to trip you up at first. And then 16th notes, and this one is going to trip you up again. Okay? And then we're going to put them all together. Okay? This is definitely the type of worksheet that might take you a few weeks. That's okay. Very much you need to use your metronome, because if you don't, the triplets are going to drag your beat all over the place, right? Because you're not subdividing into nice square things, your sense of time will just get lopsided. One of the reasons it took computers so long to play convincing music is triplets, right? So much of our music is based on a triplet underlying feel, and computers couldn't do that for a very long time. And so it took a really long time for computers to make music that was convincingly music, or convincingly not computer music, right? And your brain and your body sort of will be the same at first. You're gonna have to feel your way through. Triplets are often said to be round in their time feel, and all that means is just that it's a circle, so there isn't really a up down, right? With 8th notes it's 1 and 2 and. With triplets you've got that circle, because as soon as you try and do, I mean, you could think of it as a triangle, I suppose. The problem with a triangle is there's a stop at each corner in a way that there really isn't with triplets. Let's play them and you'll see, I think you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's try 75 beats per minute, which might be a little on the quick side, but especially for number 1, shouldn't be too bad. Remember, if you've got the paid version of Pro Metronome, it has the subdivisions right in it, so you can listen to the triplet subdivision and see how they feel. If you're having lots of trouble getting the triplet feel, a thing that you can do is count groups of 3 for both measures, and I'll show you how that works. So even when you're playing the quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Right? Anytime you're having trouble with playing a subdivision, remember that the counting or slowing it down or subdividing it in a different way is how you want to tackle the problem. Right? There's always a way. It's one of the things I like to tell my students, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So there's always a way to figure out how to take a smaller bite or a different bite. You know, there's a way to tackle these that you will be able to understand them right now. And you might not be able to play them super fast, you might not be able to play the whole exercise, but you'll be able to understand them right now, okay? So let me play through each line with the metronome so you can see how they sound. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1, 3, 4. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Number 2. Now eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Okay, so if we want to think about eighth notes as twice as fast as quarter notes, triplets, eighth note triplets, are 1.5 times as fast as eighth notes. They're between eighth notes and 16th notes, right? So if we go from eighth notes to 16th notes, that's twice as fast, right? Twice as frequent, twice as many notes in the same space. Eighth notes to eighth note triplets is 1.5 times as fast, right? 3 in the space of 2, 3 to 2, okay? So number 2, 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1. Okay? See why I said to use the metronome? So number 3, now 16th notes to triplets. Now the triplets are slower than the first measure, right? The first measure is 4 notes per beat. The second measure is 3 notes per beat. So we're going to have to rein ourselves in a little bit, okay? And that sounds like this. 3, 4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 E, 2, 3, 4, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1. Okay, so like I say, it is very important to work on each of these lines by themselves and get really comfortable going from 1 note per beat to 3 notes per beat, and then back to 1 note per beat. 2 to 3 to 2, and then from 4 to 3 to 4. Okay? But in number 4, we're going to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and then back to 1. Okay, so we've got quarter notes, and then eighth notes, and then eighth note triplets, and then 16th notes, and then back to quarter notes. And back to quarter notes is usually the one that's the hardest for students, right? Because we've worked ourselves up to 16th notes, and then we've got to slow way back down. And that's another place where the metronome can be super helpful, right? Okay, so number 4. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Okay? When the note groupings start to get more busy, like really even with 2s, but definitely with 3s and 4s, a thing to remember if you're having trouble staying with the metronome, you're aiming for the next beat, right? So when I'm playing 1, 2, 3, 1, right after that first note that's with the click, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, I'm aiming for the next click, right? And if you're having trouble staying with the beat, that can be really helpful to think, oh, I'm aiming for that next one. And even if the notes in the middle get a little uneven, which isn't what we want, right? We want them to be perfectly even. But even if the notes in the middle get a little uneven, if you hit that next beat, you're at least going to be back in the right spot on the very next beat, right? So even if your subdivisions get a little wonky, if you're aiming for that next beat, then as long as you hit it, hopefully all should be well, okay? So that's our intro to triplets. Our last thing today, we're going to talk about flam accents. And it made sense to me today because flam accents are basically flams in groups of 3, a flam triplet. So these are number 21 on your Percussive Arts Society Rudiment list, okay? If you remember, number 20 was the flam. And then we skipped 21 because I didn't want to talk about triplets yet. So then we did 22, the flam tap, right? Now we're going to do number 21, the flam accent. So if I take my triplets and I put an accent on the first note, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to play triplets with accents, no flams. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now if I make that accent a flam, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, flam accent, flam accent, flam triplet, flam triplet, flam accent, flam accent, flam accent. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, flam 2, 3, flam 2, flam accent, flam accent, flam accent, flam accent. This is one of those times where it's very important that you're keeping your flams crystal clear, whether it's a right flam or left flam. It's very easy at first to let your grace note kind of drift up, and then you get confused about what hand you're actually playing your flam with and what hand is supposed to come next. Right? But because I'm making my flams super crystal clear, this is a right flam, right? My right hand is way up here and my left hand is way down here. So what comes next? Well, I did a right flam, so in the flam accent, I play the same hand that played the grace note next. So right, left, right, left, right, left. And I'm using the upstrokes a little bit, right? So if I do flam, up, tap, 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 flam, up, tap. So you can see those are triplets, basically. Those are groups of 3. Flam, 2, 3, flam, 2, 3, flam, 2, 3, flam, 2, 3. So you could put those in our Intro to Triplets worksheet, right? So in number 1, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, flam accent, flam triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, flam triplet, flam triplet, flam triplet, flam triplet. And you don't have to, right? If that feels crazy overwhelming, then don't, right? But that's where this kind of stuff is headed, right? We're working on the rudiments so that we can play them with patterns and then gradually put them together for solos and actual pieces of music, right? You know, all this stuff we're working on, if we weren't aiming for music, there wouldn't really be any point, right? I'm not a big fan of busy work, right? I don't like working on something that isn't heading somewhere. And so I really try to never do that for students too. I promise that we're learning these tools because we're going to use them for pieces of music, right? You know, we already did with that little snare drum solo talking points. That was very simple, but it's still a piece of music, right? And, you know, the difference between exercises and music is profound, right? Like, these exercises I wouldn't really play in front of people, which is kind of a lie. So when I was in drum corps, one of the things you would do is, like, nowadays they even have like videos that they call in the lot, right? So you'd go and you'd warm up and people would gather around and watch you warm up, right? So we were sure you'd perform warm-ups in front of people, but those are warm-ups, they aren't pieces of music, right? Even when you make warm-ups musical, there's a line there usually. Sometimes exercises, or in classical music, etudes, can kind of jump over that line and become pieces of music in and of themselves. But really none of the exercises we've done yet would I consider pieces of music on their own. That's all I'm trying to say. So anyway, that's going to wrap us up for today. So we've got our 5-stroke roll sheet. I hope you've been working on your doubles. If you haven't, this is a good time to kind of re-up on your doubles. They're super important. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say learning to play that double bounce is the single biggest step you'll take ever in your drumming. No matter what you ever learn, nothing will be as big a step as that. And then we have triplets and we have flam accents. Last week we did paradiddles with accents. We're gonna do some stuff with the paradiddles with accents next week. So I want to make sure that you're still working on those too. Okay? Remember, everything is kind of, it's a web, but everything is moving out together, right? So you kind of need to be working on, you know, it's complicated. You need to be budgeting your time, obviously, but you kind of need to be working on everything, or picking, you know, one thing to focus on, right? If you've been hardcore working on your double stroke rolls this whole time, and now we got to 5-stroke rolls, you might be psyched and you might get through the 5-stroke rolls in a couple days and be, you know, chomping at the bit for 9-stroke rolls. Whereas if you have kind of put double stroke rolls to the side, 5-stroke rolls might be more daunting, right? So budget your time, work on everything the best you can. There is no one right path through this material. It's been very interesting creating this series for you all, because not being able to see your progress and knowing that I have, you know, more than one person, right? It's one thing when I have one person and I can look at them and I can say, oh, you need to work on this, and this is the perfect thing for you to work on, right? That's a skill I like to think I have, and it's fun. Whereas this, trying to do general lessons for everybody, has been really kind of challenging. So if you know, feel free to work on a different part of the spider web for a while and come back to to another part of the web, right? We are moving at a blistering pace. Okay, you should know that. This is blistering. Okay, mostly because I want each of these lessons to be full of material. I don't want each week just for me to be saying, okay, let's review what we did last time, and then playing it for you 100 times, right? You can do that by watching the video again, right? So like I've said before, if these videos get ahead of you, don't worry about that. Don't feel bad. Just go at your own pace, okay? There is no right pace to tackle this material. Okay, so that's going to wrap us up today. I hope you join me on Friday when we'll be on the drum set. I hope you liked this video enough to give me a thumbs up. If you hated this video, I'll understand if you give me a thumbs down. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell to get notified of new videos. And if you want to hit me up on Instagram or Facebook, I am Penny Larson Drums on both of those platforms. So I will see you Friday, and take care. Love you guys. Bye.